Shutdown night,
All right, everyone. Welcome to another Thursday night on your internet, intertubes, live. It's free for all. Once again, here at a new spot, Distant Warrior Productions. That's our new company that we're producing for. So, everyone, if you haven't done so already, please go out and find at Distant Warrior, all one word, on X, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere you care to look, and we should be there. And free for all, however, Hodey, the folks will be happy to know we haven't changed at all, and we're not going to be changing what we're doing around here because we think we're doing a little bit of good by doing this show. So let me introduce my co-host, as always, and good friend, always looking dapper at any given moment, none other than Mr. Hodey Johns. Hodey, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. You thinking I look dapper all the time just means you haven't seen me sleep. So that's good. I'm glad your surveillance camera isn't working there. No, I like it. Distant Warrior DW. And I am a big Darkwing Duck fan from back in the day. So when you're in trouble, yeah, call DW.
Yeah.
So like we are, I'm very happy about that. I'm glad that we're still going. We've got our vision for things, like you said, we're not changing. And that's kind of why we're here. And so I'm just excited. I'm just excited about all that.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that. And also, I'm in a good mood. It's halftime at the Thursday night game. My Giants are on. They're ahead of the hated Eagles, 2017. So, but I'm fully aware of the fact that by the time this show is over, I'll tune in to find out they blew it on the last second pass interference call or something. You know, I'm fairly confident in my team's ability to disappoint me.
Well, all right, the Broncos, who just beat them last week, I send the best of my luck over to you tonight, and hope that you can hang on and join us in the end.
Yes, absolutely. The Broncos are having a pretty good year. I kind of like what they're doing over there. All right. Before we get too much down the road of the NFL, if you're watching us, please feel free to join us in the chat, YouTube, Facebook, X, of course. All your questions and comments, we love to see them. Send them our way. You know the only rule. Even if Jeremiah is watching, there's only one rule: no four-letter words if you want to get on the screen. Otherwise, you leave it up to me to interpret your intentions as I relay them to the world. All right. Oh, and Hodey disappeared there for a second. We'll wait for him to come back. But, okay, everyone. So the topic for tonight, assuming my co-host makes it back, I'm trying to see if he needs to jump on or not.
I'm hoping you can still at least hear
back.
Me.
Yes,
I think
you're back.
Just the audio, the video disappeared.
The video.
I'm not going to touch that cord for a second. I was grabbing a soda. I'm going to move the soda to my other side there. Sorry about that.
Smart move. What was that? You don't want, there was an SNL skit based on the China syndrome. Was it the Pepsi syndrome? John Belushi spilled the Pepsi on his keyboard and caused a nuclear meltdown.
That is very unfavorable depiction of what I did, but it's not inaccurate.
not completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
All right. So, again, just to let everyone know, feel free to, as the show progresses, feel free to contact us with your questions or comments right there in the chat, folks. We love to hear from you every week. We do it so we can interact with folks as well as discuss issues of liberty for everyone. And Hodey, this week, one of the things we're going to talk about, or the thing we're going to talk about, is the drum roll, please, the government shutdown. You know, we always hear about these, the government shutting down. It's happened before in the past. It usually happens when they can't agree on a budget or a continuing resolution. So Hodey, why don't I turn this over to you and you tell me what led up and what the situation is with this year's version of the government shutdown.
Well, kind of the usual. It's which is kind of odd for the Trump administration for something the usual to happen. But yeah, once you get to a point where you don't have an agreement to raise the debt ceiling yet again, get all your payments in order, then there becomes some contentiousness. In this case, despite the Republicans having control of everything, they don't have control of some of their own members. Obviously, the notables, and they're known names to us, but your Rand Pauls and your Thomas Masseys are not just going along. They are like, we have been rejecting every time people have proposed, let's spend more money, let's increase the debt ceiling, when it is not balanced out by some kind of let's stop spending on this, stop spending on that. They don't go along. And so in this case, the government has shut down. It's amazing to me that this has become a standard thing at this point, that to the point where I remember the first time it happened in my adult life, and I was kind of like scared, like what's going to happen. And now it's just like, oh, this again? Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, there are tangible effects of the government shutting down. I guess depending on your point of view, your situation in life, and your political outlook, perhaps, it's either a cause of celebration, a cause of dismay, or honestly, like for a lot of people, a sort of, politicians are going to politic, I guess. So, Hodey, let's set the stage. This shutdown occurred on October 1st. So we're basically into our second week of the shutdown. Because Congress failed to enact or extend appropriations for the new fiscal year, this meant that all non-essential services were being ceased. They had to stop. Now, of course, devil's in the details. What are essential services? What's considered mandatory spending versus discretionary spending? And there's other details as well. But let's start off with that. Hodey, why don't you give us an understanding? You're our read every piece of information on the subject guy on this team. So what are the differences between mandatory and discretionary services and spending?
Yeah, so I want to be very clear here. The discretionary and non-discretionary and interest on the debt payments, all still mandated, all still required. So we call them, when we say discretionary from a legal standpoint, that is like certain things that we budget, I believe. So welfare, Social Security, that's all non-discretionary. I believe the Department of War, now that it's called, is discretionary. And while libertarians want to be excited, literally 100% of the government's spending is in those three categories: discretionary, non-discretionary, and interest. So you say, well, then is everything still getting funded? I don't understand what's happening. No, there are private sector things that are no longer being funded, and those are private sector contracts. So a good example of this, and something that I do want to point out, like you said, it does affect some people, as much as I like to joke about you haven't noticed anything. Right. Airport delays went from 3% to 53% averages. That is because air traffic control is, while they are not owned by the government, they are contracted by the government, and we contract them out. And so they are furloughed. Legally, they are still owed every single dime that they work during this time period. It's just on a delay. So those people aren't getting paid. Now you say, well, they're still kind of mandated to work by contract, even without pay. We have a word for that. It's not a very kind one, but they are legally obligated to work. But by the I forget the name of the act. I have it in the notes, and shame on me for not being open to the right page. But basically, legally, we do still owe them the pay. Right. They will just be paid after we get all this figured out. And so they will eventually receive their payments. That is, unless Donald Trump simply refuses to pay or issues an executive order saying that they should not be paid. Now, even in that case, they are still legally obligated to get paid, but we hit an issue then with the judicial system where we have to say, okay, we have to sue you in order for us to get paid. As a result, and this is where we're getting some disruption, some people are, instead of wanting to go through all that, maybe I'll have to sue him, maybe he's going to issue an executive order to stop me from getting paid or something like that, I'm just going to leave my position and not come back to work anymore. And we have seen that for about, I think about 100,000 workers at this point, contracted workers at this point. Right. So it is somewhat disruptive.
it is disruptive to those contractors, and like you said, there could be real world effects. Like you said, horrible delays. Now, these may or may not. I mean, generally, I would not think of them as life threatening to anyone. Um, Certainly, life inconvenient, right? Like for any of us stuck at airports for days unexpectedly. There's, it's an unexpected delay. It's an unexpected expense in a lot of cases. It may or may not put a strain on families that, like say a caretaker having to travel and not being able to. So it does have real world implications. Now, for those of us, or for those who are, say, in the Republican camp, if you're a Republican, is what about this shutdown should Republican lawmakers have to worry, in your opinion? I'm throwing a curveball at you, Hodey, but I think you can handle it. If you're a Republican, what do your lawmakers have to potentially make sure you don't get upset about as a result of this shutdown?
So if I'm a Republican voter, what are the lawmakers? What am I representing?
In other words, what is there anything Republican politicians, is there anything MAGA politicians have to keep in mind during this shutdown to keep their base happy? What service might be cut off that would benefit Republicans specifically? And then I'll ask you the same about the Democrats.
Yeah, well, contrary to what Republicans like to believe, they actually own more of the lowest class that is receiving welfare payments than conversely. This isn't, I think they focus on what they call true welfare payments, which obviously then you kind of get your inner city and urbanization, but through agricultural programs, they receive a lot of their benefits, and they're going to see some of those things that are worked through a contractor go away, especially in the case of agriculture, where you say, well, yes, the Department of Agriculture has a lot, but they contract a lot of their work out and their subsidies out through these private companies. And so you're going to see a lot of the farmers, a lot of the workers. So a lot of these subsidies and kickbacks, you're going to lose a lot of the farmland, a lot of the heartland. When you look at that, Republicans do this all the time. When you look at that overview of red America with a few blue dots in there, yeah, that's the red America we're talking about, right? So if you want to keep those in your pocket, obviously you've got to help them out. I think the transportation is a big one. I think Republicans, they make flights like people do. I think that you have a lot of business class people that are being inconvenienced. 53% chance of your flight being late is pretty wild. There was in California, they had a completely unmanned control tower for 6 hours. Something like that, and it's just one of those that's going to hurt. So I think those would be my big ones. So Social Security, obviously, still mostly funded. Still, that's not contracted out. There are a few VA services. Again, those are pretty Republican. Those can experience some occasional hiccups, but most of those are covered. Like I said, most everything is covered. Everything that's not contract. I guess the ones that I think of to answer your question directly are the flyers, the farmlands, your national and local parks, your museums. A lot of those visitors tend to be on the wealthier side. Let's see here. Immigrant courts, Republicans. I know they don't care about immigrants, but actually, if your immigrant courts, which are also contracted out, those are not by the government, or those aren't directly owned by the government, then you can't really deport somebody with their due process if you haven't processed them. And if you
due process has never been a problem for the for the regular administration. Okay, now I think it's easier, and especially the way it's framed in the news. It's a little bit easier to frame what might upset Democrat voters, who apparently the president doesn't seem to care about anyway, right? So for them, it would be the more of what we blanket might say, Hodey, welfare programs, SNAP programs, educational programs, things of that nature, correct?
Yeah. So your federal grants and audits, again, those are contracted out. And so that's education. That's the one that Trump has specifically mentioned going after there. Pell Grants. So a lot of these are wages that would go, or not wages, but they're money that would be given to students eventually. They're monies that would go to new schools that would help overcrowded schools. That's definitely an urban environment situation. So, those overcrowded schools, they're going to say, sorry, you can't open up your new school to divide those students. You have to keep those higher classroom sizes. your kids are going to get less one-on-one attention. That's certainly there. Research agencies are a big one for the lefties. Your greenhouse gases, your alternative technologies, your alternative energies, civil rights investigations are mostly contracted out. So that's something that if there's a civil rights violation, obviously that can be a pain as well. And of course, I'll point to the immigrant one that connects to both. Yes, you might not be able to deport them, but you can keep them like detained indefinitely, right? Until they get there. And that's something that obviously the Democrats care about as well. So yeah, your federal employees, your contract workers, I won't pretend that those are mostly, well, I guess they're about 50-50 Republican and Democrat, but yeah, the Democrats care about those as well. Your federal employees, certainly, to be furloughed. Yes, they might still be working without pay if that's their choice. But there are currently 900,000 federal workers that are not being paid or that are working they have had their jobs furloughed, and 700,000 that are working without pay right now. That's a total of about 1.6 million people. And that's Republicans and Democrats. It's a big chunk.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, Hodey, is because you have that layer like we just described, like who gets affected by what's actually a payment, what's not actually a payment. And I've always found that interesting. But what's even more interesting, obviously, is who gets the blame politically for this mess, right? Now, because obviously the Republicans control all the branches of government. Here's a simple question, again, for our audience that may not be steeped in politics. The Republicans have the White House, the Republicans have the Senate, the Republicans have the House of Representatives. Why are they complaining that the Democrats are preventing a budget from being passed or a continuing resolution from being passed?
I mean, the answer is pretty simple. The bulk of the opposition, the reason they can't get what they want pushed through is we can say, oh, it's because you've got 3 or 4 Republican holdouts. But of course, the entire Democratic Party is opposed to your continuing resolution, right? Despite the fact that it's the same resolution that they voted in favor of under Biden. And, but they are now, this is how politics has been working, right? This is not the first time this has happened. But Trump is now faced with the entire Democratic Party voting as a block against him. And it's easier to say, I mean, it hasn't stopped Trump from starting a war with Massey and Paul and, we're like Amash, even though he's not in Congress, for supporting the Republicans to stand firm and not and go against him. That you could start a war with those guys, but that's a civil war. And Trump is definitely more into squashing his enemies. And so, he canceled the meetings that would discuss some Democratic things that they wanted to see within the CR. He didn't want to negotiate with the Democrats at all. He wants them to be the enemy for this one. And so that way he can say, oh, it's your fault that I canceled this program. Or like I said, he might not legally be able to do it, but that he is going to attempt to cancel things. Luckily at the moment, he's still only threatening. But we'll see how much longer this shutdown goes for. I don't see him willing to compromise with the Democrats anytime soon. And I don't know if Massey and Paul are budging. So we'll see. And
so you're right. But let me ask you this. So and I have to admit, the level of lockstep that Republicans have had with this messaging is fairly impressive. I mean, it starts with the president. It trickles down through the Minister of Propaganda there, Miller. It goes all the way through the Senate mouthpieces like Ted Cruz, Howley, all these people, all the way into the House with Mike Johnson, right? That the reason the reason the government is shut down is because of Democrats, of course, and it's because they care more about providing health care to illegals than they do taking care of American citizens. That has been their major talking point in trying to shift the political blame, Hodey, to the left. And admittedly, it's a powerful statement if you're a Republican, right? It resonates with Joe everyday person in this country, I can't say that I've heard effective counter messaging from the left. I mean, you've had some feeble attempts from people like AOC and whatnot to try to say, hey, we're not doing anything. We're just following the Constitution, blah, 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 right? But it really hasn't been effective. Even to my ear, their messaging does not sound effective at all, Hodey. So help me out with two things here as we talk about this. A, how effective is, in your opinion, how effective is the Republican messaging on why the Democrats should own this shutdown? And B, are they lying? Are they telling the truth? Is it sort of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that? Well, what do you feel about their messaging?
I mean, they're obviously lying. That is one of those, they are fighting through fact check after fact check when it comes to immigrants receiving whatever proportion of benefits that you're getting. I'm with you that it certainly relates to Joe Everyman, like you said, because you don't want to think about you working hard. I mean, people aren't getting their fair share of wages right now, right? Since the rejection of the gold standard, like you see a graph of American productivity keeps going up, and share of our productivity for the American workers has actually gone down since then. And so we are not receiving what we are supposed to be getting. Trump has been extremely effective in saying that this is because of the left, it's because of the Democrats, it's because of immigrants, it's because of Mexicans, it's because of Haitians, it's because of Bad Bunny and the Puerto Ricans, and all these people are gonna,
right.
They're the reason that you're not getting your fair wages, is the Democrats would rather pay these people for it. And this is the issue with the Democrats, is they have taken an anti-leftist position on this matter, sided with the Republicans, but just toned it down a little bit. And so the unfortunate part about the Democratic Party is, instead of standing with truth and saying, yes, these immigrants, they are not doing, they are working hard, they've earned every buck, they are not getting the amount of benefits that you guys are getting. If we were to be fiscally conservative, we would welcome in the immigrants and deport our own citizens, if you really want to talk about deportations. But the Democrats don't have the stomach for that. What they did is they acknowledged that Republicans won the war on messaging on this one, even if that messaging was wrong. And instead of fighting through it, they've just simply said, we'll still be bad to immigrants, but we're not going to be as bad as they are. As a result, they've lost the entirety of the people who care about the truth, as well as their radical base who would actually want to show up to support them. And so people are looking on the horizon and just saying, one of the issues is that we've noticed with Donald Trump is when he loses support, his support does not go to the other side. It just disappears. And so this is similar, that what they're worried about is, as Trump loses support, and he is losing support, it's not going to the Democrats right now. And for obvious reasons, they're Donald Trump, but simply a little less bad than Donald Trump, which I could only make for this version of 2024 Donald Trump. 2020 Joe Biden through 2024 was much worse to immigrants than 2016 to 2020 Donald Trump. They've been getting worse to immigrants. They've just settled for trying to slow it a little bit. Obviously, Donald Trump has completely escalated it in 2024 to well beyond where it needs to be. But they basically, because they conceded the war, the messaging loss, they have eroded all their goodwill and support from the people who actually love immigrants and care about them. If I were to point to the Democratic Party, I know people don't want to hear this because I'm aware it's a risk, but I would say, look, as opposed to trying to pull from Republican votes, because you're not going to get those votes.
Right.
Statistically, we've seen that. Show up for the people who are staying at home. Show up for your actual leftists who are like, hey, listen, this is like the 8th time we've passed an immigration restriction bill and completely effed up our economy. I am saying, like, you can make a Joe everyday common man argument to just be like, our economy depends on immigrants. They are helping our economy. They are helping your paychecks. Your prices are getting worse and worse and worse the worse we are to immigrants. And so you are standing up for the everyday common man by standing up for immigrants. The Democrats have just refused to do it, and it's embarrassing.
And it's also a tough message to put across, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't understand the interconnectivity of a lot of these things. Like when you see Trump put that same message across to farmers, you mentioned agriculture before.
Mhm.
You know, why do they need subsidies? It's because of his tariffs. His tariffs have a lot to do with that. But those same people are not making that connection, right? Or if they are, they're not as upset about it as one would think they should be. So you're right. Maybe pushing that across might be the logical thing to do, but I don't know if it resonates. It's not emotional enough, and it's
Mhm.
not sticking. So that's how Republicans should feel. That's how Democrats should feel, Hody. I want to talk about libertarians, but let me take a second to look at the comments here. Hey, hey, says Aaron Goss. Okay, hey, Aaron, how you doing there? Nice to have you
Aaron,
on board. Do you know who Aaron is there, Hody?
I just came from Aaron's book club. It is a fantastic book club. It is open to people of many walks of life and political persuasions. If you ever want to join, ask me, ask Aaron. We are currently reading Markets Not Capitalism, but before you go to thinking this is a like socialist or communist only book club, we've read Mises before. We just are taking a bunch of different points of view. It's a collection of essays. I know when you were like, Hody, you're so well read. Aaron is one of the guys that has helped me stay well read.
All right, then. Thank you, Aaron, for providing me with such a well-read co-host. I appreciate you for that. All right. So moving on now. Now let's talk about libertarians, because after all, I think you and I would consider ourselves libertarians, if not of the Libertarian Party, then of that persuasion. There's a range of responses that I've seen anecdotally from libertarians, from the McCardle libertarians, so-called libertarians, to like go Trump, you know, get those Dems.
Nice correction there, by the way.
Yeah.
Good job.
You know, to like say the libertarians that perhaps you and I would represent or consider part of, like the more classical liberal wing of it, or even the minarchist wing of it.
Yeah.
Where we'll say like, you know, there's a different set of responses for people who are tuning in, who are trying to learn about libertarianism, maybe try to see what we think about the practical implications of libertarianism, not necessarily pragmatists or that dirty word prags among libertarians, Hody. But this shutdown gives libertarians an opportunity to be able to put to kind of put their money where their mouth is, right? Like for me, one of the great things about a shutdown isn't necessarily the human suffering that inevitably will come with it to at least a fraction or a certain percentage of the population, right? Like there's no way to sugarcoat it. If the government were to completely shut down, other than say protecting against foreign attack or whatever, there would be undoubtedly suffering, right? The kids who would go without lunches, like that's provided by SNAP, or certain educational resources or certain medical resources. We understand that. And maybe in the world of Ancapistan, there would be enough charity to go around and enough productivity to go around. We get that. But in the here and now, as we're standing here right now, one of the good things I see about shutdowns is it more clearly focuses the mind on what is waste, what is truly waste, and what is, at least if you had to start over, something you might keep around until society sort of gets reshaped and reformed, right? So to me, it's the like, how much for the majority of people, or even for any given individual, how much has this shutdown truly affected your life? If the answer is no, it really hasn't had that much of an impact. That again should set off alarm bells for you. Then why is, I live in New York, why is roughly 70% of my paycheck absconded to taxes, fees, licensure, and all this nonsense, right? Where does that go to? Why is it that even by its very spending of its budget, the government reduces the value of my dollar? To your point, productivity goes up, real wages stay flat or go down. Part of that is that the currency constantly gets devalued ever since we got off the gold standard, right? So that to me, Hody, is one of the benefits of the shutdown. It kind of it makes people decide what is it that you really care about. If you're having your money extracted from you, okay, you do it at gunpoint unwillingly, but at least is it going to something that you would consider at least worthwhile? And to me, this is one of the things that the shutdown very clearly lays out in front of you.
Yeah, it's what we are looking at is now we're seeing a government that says we're going to fire all our contract workers, but the bombs will still fall. The hey, your airplane is going to be inconvenient, something that we do value. Oh, we're not going to pay these. Some of these farmers aren't going to get the money they got before. We're not going to build that new school. And you do see the priorities of where the government is at.
Where this government is at, right? Because to your point, there's still budget to round up the immigrants and throw them out.
Oh yeah,
right.
Oh
There's
yeah,
plenty of money for that.
Right.
Right.
We turned ICE into the 5th largest military in the world. They're bigger than the U.S. Marines. I just saw that the other day.
Yep.
That there's money for all of those things. I am trying to bolster your point by saying that. Like we suddenly say, oh, we don't have the money for this. It's like when your local school system is like, oh, we ran out of money to pay our teachers. But you pass the superintendent's office and there's like 18 Ferraris in the parking lot. And you're like, well, what is going on here? Right. Like obviously,
or the football team got new uniforms or something. And you're like, let's change up our priorities. Like if you're like that, actually the school is a great example because in a lot of ways, I remember in the Free to Choose series that Milton Friedman had when he first put out in 1980, one of the examples for school choice was exactly that. And he said, well, it forces you to choose. If you're a school, it forces you to choose your priorities. And someone in the audience or one of the other side of the debate said, well, what if schools choose to just support their athletics and not their academics? He goes, fantastic. He goes, go to that school. If you think your kid is going to be a better football player than a scholar, why not send them to that school? Or because there'll be another school that'll focus on no athletics and just academics, right? He goes, that's what we want. We want people to make these decisions on their own. And I like that point that you referenced because it's the same thing here. It's like choose what's important to you. Assume that you can't have it all. If you literally had to cut the budget by 50%, cut it in half, what would be on the side that stayed and what would be on the side that got jettisoned? I know Doge attempted that. I know they attempted that, at least in theory. But the problem is, nobody had the stomach for actually doing it, and it was more of a political tool, right? Because it was just to point out how the Democrats were wasteful. It never pointed out all the waste that the Republicans are responsible for, say in the military or the whatever, the alphabet agencies or whatever, right? So and to that point, President Trump in his dog and pony show with the right-wing influencers, like in the and his so-called strategy sessions where he has his entire cabinet kiss his butt in front of the cameras. He basically said, hey, look, I'm trying my best, but if we have to shut down the government, the first programs that are going to go are all the ones that Democrats love. Sorry, I'm in charge. That's what happens. And to some extent, he's right. I mean, if you can't find a compromise in Congress and Trump is picking off all the discretionary stuff by executive order, he's going to pick all the ones that are the darlings of the left, Hodey. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about fairness in that type of thinking. Talk to me about the morality of something like that. Or it's perfectly moral, it's perfectly okay, or how do you view that?
No, I mean, how you take apart the government is important, right? Like, and it shows where people's, like we were just talking about this, so it shows where people's priorities are at, right? Like when we take apart the government, like as anarchists or minarchists, and just say this is something that shouldn't be here. If we take away people's individual welfare, their $200 a month for food cards before we start touching like big corporate subsidies for providing absolutely no value, or like the whatever it is, $2.5 trillion at the Pentagon that they just can't find anymore, right? Like when we say no, you're the ones, like we got to hold you accountable, but but these guys, no, that they can keep spending to their heart's delight,
right?
It actually makes government bigger. We've talked before about how you can make the government bigger by pretending you're making it smaller, by cutting agencies, and then all those agencies' powers just so happen to fall into your new umbrella, right? And like this is something that I hate to invoke the word, but this is something we should learn from the Third Reich, right? Like this is something that we need to learn from countries that have done this before, how to fake being small government and end up going big government. Oh, but they cut all these agencies. Well, that didn't really look the way that it should. It's not right. It's not fair. As an anarchist, I don't care what credit I lose. We need to be honest. This shutdown is remarkably anti-libertarian because it's your common men who are not getting paid. It's the stuff that the people want that aren't getting paid for. It's the stuff that isn't killing innocent people, the stuff that is keeping people afloat, right? Like, and we're cutting that while the Pentagon, no, they're still losing money. They're still failing their audits. They're just fine. We're, like you said, we're still finding the money for the drones that blow up innocent people. You know, all your Congress people are getting paid, right? This shutdown doesn't touch them, right? Like, and it would be like an athletics team where all the athletes, we just kind of said, oh yeah, like you guys don't have to play. And then we're being like, yay, we're shrinking the size of the size and scope of athletics. And it's like, well, you're still paying them. You're just not getting the entertainment value anymore out of it, right? Like we're not getting what we deserve out of these things. And of course they want to make it scary. And so they're going to do things like cut away people's SNAP benefits. They're going to cut away, oh, that road construction project is now just going to have that road shut down forever. And all these little things. These are fractions of a fraction of a fraction of 1%, but they are doing it to make you go, oh gosh, we need government back. Let's make sure to get them fully funded. And Trump is, to his credit, being very transparent and saying, I'm going to cut all the things that you lefties like first, right? We're going to start with all the stuff that you like, which is kind of a lot of stuff that like we already talked about it, that kind of most people like. It's just, it's not fair. It's not right.
And to your point, I think one of the traps that libertarians set for themselves is that sometimes they'll view these actions in isolation, right? So if someone were to walk up to you sans context and say, I thought libertarians were for smaller government and that private charity should replace public welfare and things like that nature. And they'll say, so according to your libertarian principles, Mr. Libertarian, what's wrong with cutting SNAP? And the danger, of course, is exactly what you just outlined, Hodey, which is like, okay, if that was the last thing on the table, sure, I would be a hypocrite at that point. But if you're telling me that we've still got somebody of questionable alcoholic restraint running around bombing boats of like 10, 12 people in the middle of international waters without warrant, without congressional approval, and then puts out a banger video about it to the tune of Love Boat, while there's a whole bunch of ghouls applauding and retweeting it, yeah, maybe I'm not a hypocrite then. Maybe I'd rather see the funding for that sort of nonsense, for that sort of illegal activity, unconstitutional activity to be stopped before maybe I take away, like you said, somebody's $200 a month food card, something that keeps them from literally starving, either in the inner city or out somewhere in the rural areas or something like that, or in the Ozarks or wherever, right? So, yeah, I think that's Hodey. Do you find that a lot, or is it just me overreacting? Because I seem to see from our own libertarians who will start espousing like, "What are you guys complaining about?" Like, and we know the wing it comes from, but I mean, what do you think about that? Like, am I overreacting? Am I reading too much into it, or is it really not that much of an issue amongst the libertarian tribe?
No. If libertarians don't know how callous they come off, that's a massive indictment against libertarians. That we come off as very aloof to the poor and have frequently and often sold out to the Republican Party, including very recently. And when they talk about, oh no, it's the fault of these immigrants, it's the fault of these single moms, it's the fault of these people, it's that person getting that $200 a month that they need to live, but please ignore that $1 trillion machine over there. That one's out for your benefit, right? Like, right. We are selling out these people. and what they need to do to live in this deeply, deeply unjust society. Now, listen, I'm the anarchist. Taxation is theft. We should not have taxation. We should not be spending any money on anybody at any time on anything, et cetera, et cetera. But like, just open a history book. Like, when these people say that they are small government, we libertarians have been unfortunately willing to kind of give into that, what is clear virtue signaling. Right. What is clear when we say small government, what we mean by it. Trump is spending more than ever. Doge wasn't even close to successful. We combined everything that they cut. We just kind of gave those same powers to somebody else because, frankly, legally we had to. Like, you can't just cut discretionary and non-discretionary spending without an act. And so when that was supposed to get codified in the continuing resolution, the Republicans didn't do it. We gave into their virtue signaling and refused to do the part that actually would have made it permanent. And so, like, right now, we look at the government spending, you look at the debt clock, and you're like, but that is still going up.
Yeah, it's heading in the wrong direction, right?
Right. I thought a government shutdown, shouldn't that be like the one benefit, right? The government shut down. Oh, good. That means that at least we're not spending money on any of this stuff. No, we're spending money on all of it. We are caving to what sounds like a good idea as opposed to what is actually a good idea. If we want to turn it into a good opportunity, then we should kind of phrase it like, hey, if the government actually shuts down and the bombs stop flying, our politicians stop getting the money they need to manipulate the stock market, fantastic, right? Sign us up. We're there. We're excited about it. We're ready to go. But what they mean by shutdown is that kind of your neighbors aren't getting their paychecks. And hey, listen, the SNAP benefits, that's kind of a separate issue. It's not only the shutdown that this is happening, but 1% of America lost their SNAP benefits starting October 1st. Now, 1% might not sound like a lot, but do you know 100 people? Do you like 100 people? If so, then one of the 100 people that you know suddenly all of a sudden is no longer able to feed their kids anymore. And that is deeply unfair so long as we are paying this money to people who don't deserve it. And then this person here who's just trying to feed their kids, feed their family, and we're saying, sorry, your check's not coming in the mail anymore.
Yeah, that 1% translate to millions, Hodey, right? That's millions of people. It's not like a couple hundred, to your point. And further to your point, it's not just the shutdown. They're getting hit by a double whammy. So some of the provisions of SNAP were legislated out of existence by the one big bloated bill. To your point, and to my bad attempt at mockery, the big bloated bill, I call it that because it increased the deficit. It spends more than what was in the original budget, but it somehow combined spending more and cutting the resources for those that need it most. And I know there's a lot of conservatives out there, a lot of MAGAs out there that say, oh, it's just, most of SNAP goes to immigrants, it's welfare queens, or it's, that old tropism. And it's like, no, man, we're not saying there's no fraud involved. We're just saying that probably most of that is literally keeping people alive. And for you to callously cheer that on, while the very bill that, to your point, is eliminating a lot of those resources, literally just created a fifth wing of the armed services. ICE, to your point, is bigger than the U.S. Marines. It's funded bigger than the U.S. Marines. It's funded more than 14 other sovereign nations' armies around the world. If ICE were its own, sovereign armed service, right? So you found plenty of money for that. You're continuing to rob us of plenty of our money for something like that, but you're making villains out of SNAP recipients. And the people who are getting the benefits have to be under the scrutiny of someone like RFK who won't let you buy a Coke Zero with it or something, right?
Right. Yeah,
So-
we said we want these guys to stop having $200 a month so much that we're going to pay these guys $1 trillion a year to make sure you don't get your $200 a month.
Right, exactly.
Just goofed it, man.
It's the height of insanity when you think about it. And yeah, it's listen, I don't think people understand, Hodey, and I'll go a little born again on you. I don't think people realize how blessed this country is as a nation in terms of the fact that this nation has had the greatest productivity of human history economically, in my opinion. Like, I think that if you consider that we're the world's biggest economy, to the point where the next 4 biggest economies in the country add up to our economy. That's how much bigger we are than the rest of the world. Despite what the president tells you about China and the horrible up-and-coming Filipino nation that's going to eat our lunch unless we tariff them, this country has always been blessed. From the second it was founded, it's been an economic powerhouse, and the productivity of the American people is constantly going up. To your point, if you look at all those charts, productivity goes like this, wages go down, right? Or a wage share goes down or stays flat the last, say, 25 years, okay? We are incredibly blessed in this country. We don't need gimmicks. What we need is to get back to real accounting. We need to get back to stop borrowing, stop, pay down this debt, stop spending more than the government has. Honestly, whether it's Rand Paul's penny plan, whether it's the old Jack Kemp plan from the 80s, which was just keep spending flat. You don't have to cut anything. Just keep it flat. The productivity of the American economy will pay off that debt in a nice, orderly, slow fashion. Back in the 80s, I think when Kemp first put out his plan, it would have taken 7 years to pay off the entire debt if you just kept, not decreased spending, but kept it at 0% increase, meaning nothing new, right? Now, I think the way that has exploded under Trump and Biden and Trump again, it might take us a decade to 12 years if you just kept spending at zero. Meaning, okay, nobody has to suffer. We're going to keep everything as is, and then just let the tax revenue as is come in. We're going to let productivity grow. And part of that productivity that America has always benefited from, Hodey, is immigrants. It's this constant influx of workers, of productive workers, not just for menial tasks, but when you look at their children, when you look at some of the immigrants themselves, contributing in ways that go beyond menial labor, that go beyond manual labor, things that move society forward. And America, either, lucking into it, or the founding fathers had the presence to think about this. It's largely because of being so open to immigrants historically, and being so welcoming to anybody who wanted to come here and earn a living and try to make a better life for themselves. I know that sounds like sappy, but you can't deny the facts. And so I have to wonder why we don't just buy into Rand Paul's penny plan, or whatever, or like, look, when I do Liberty Lens with Mike Termat, like, one of the things Mike that's a good Austrian economist, he's like, let's make this rules based, take politics out of it, and just have formulas. The entire budget and spending of this country should be determined by a spreadsheet. Just, here's what we took in this year. We want to have a certain percentage outlaid for this, and this. And then you just let that go. Contract when it hits a certain percentage of GDP, expand when it hits another. You know what I'm saying? It's like you try not to make it an inflationary economy. You try not to make it a spenders and a debtors economy, which is exactly the opposite of what President Trump has in mind. President Trump very clearly, not that he's any different than, say, Obama or Biden, or even Bush's 1 and 2, or Clinton, right? Clinton was, believe it or not, a little bit more fiscally responsible, I think. He was the last president working with Gingrich to have a balanced budget, right? So
close, almost made it.
Close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, I would argue. But the point being is, like, it's just that President Trump, because he has no guardrails and doesn't really view the Constitution as a hindrance on what he can do, he's really blown it up even more, and he threatens to blow it up even more. So if you're a lower income American, if you're someone who's struggling, if you want to vote your interest, don't vote for President Trump. Certainly, don't vote for the next socialist that's going to come out, whether it's from the Democrats or the Republicans. And I don't know, Hodey, I went on a little bit of a rant here towards the end of the show, but
Love it.
I don't know. What do you have to add to that?
No, I love it all. That's why I was letting you go. I think this almost was like an interview with me, and I was like, I think I need some Big John thoughts on this one. Everybody knows where I'm at. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think the issue is that certain things, we look at this and say, oh, we're a growing country, we have to expand a little bit. Well, things like defense burden actually gets lower as your population gets higher, because if you think about it, there are more people now paying to protect the exact same amount of land. If we're, you know, having a socialized defense, which is, you might not like it, but that's what we have, right? We pay for a joint defense for all of us. And
to be fair, a lot of libertarians would say,
yep,
one of the few legitimate functions of any government is the protection of its citizenry, is the protection against outward and inward aggression, right? So it is what it is, even in libertarian circles.
Absolutely, right? Like, we need to accept, like, and I think people don't like the word socialized, right? Like, it hurts our feelings a little bit. But if you're a minarchist, or if you're, you know, let's just say, hey, I'm an Ellis Island immigration person, right? Like, and hey, Marx himself was not pro-immigrant, right? So I'm not gonna, let's not pretend that like this is like socialism, but you do believe in a socialized border that is vetting people, right? Like, this is just the term, that's the political term of what it is. Like it or not like it, that's just what it is. But like, getting past that, if we just say like, hey, I accept a little bit, this is why I try to relate to like my minarchist brothers and sisters. Like, listen, we were #1 in the world, education, economy, defense, like safety, everything, when we were 100% come across the border, or in Ellis Island style, 99% go ahead, join us, come across and welcome you here. We're excited to have you. It's going to be a 5-minute process just to make sure, you know, you don't have diseases or that you're not bringing a standing army with you, right?
Right.
Fine, right? Like, we're #1 in the world with all that. What happened when we tried to close the borders? And I'm not just talking about like Trump or recently, right? Like, this is just a historical, what we did during the 1930s, like guarded gate era, the immigration restrictions came up with this great idea. I'm sorry, it was the 1920s they came up with the idea. John, something happened as a result of that policy in 1929. I'm trying to remember. My history classes are public schooling. I forget for a moment.
Yes.
But they were run out of the country because
I think it was highlighted by guys on Wall Street swan diving out of windows, I think.
Right. Right. But they had tanked the economy so badly that these immigration restrictionists actually either disavowed their own literature, or they fled the country for Nazi Germany to help craft their policy. That's not like supposition on my part. This is something that actually happened. And so they went and crafted the Holocaust. And so they tanked 2 economies in their lifetimes, right? And then thankfully, at the end of Nuremberg, most of them ended up being brought to justice. But these were Americans here who tanked our economy here with anti-immigration stuff. And then they tanked the economy there, as well as started a war or two, right? These people know how to take you from like #1 in the world at something to like number billion at the world at something. and I understand, like, I think from a common man standpoint, because I don't want to just dismiss everybody as racist or something that believes in immigration restriction. We sit here, and when we sit here, we think, what if all the uneducated people come over and want to share in all this? Will we be able to sustain them? Will we be able to sustain all the sick if they come over? All these huddled masses? Like, I understand it's good in philosophy, but what if we can't like help them all? And what if like that money gets sliced so thin between all those new people that we aren't going to make it anymore? From a from a logical standpoint, I understand, but we need to understand how ahistorical that is. That's not what happens when we welcome our borders to immigrants. They are here to work. They are here to seek better lives for themselves. And America prospers when our lives are all made better with these people.
Right.
We're seeing it again with Trump. We saw this in the 50s. We saw this in the 20s and 30s. Pro-immigration policy, we get rich. Anti-immigration policy, we get poor. If we want to extend this over to Ireland, Russia, Germany, like we can make this a global thing. This is not just like a uniquely American thing or like a leftist talking point. This is simply just being educated historically. What happens when we open our borders to immigrants is that we as a country prosper. When we have since restricted immigration, we're not number one in education anymore. So the idea that a bunch of illiterates are clamoring across our borders, like I said, it's ahistorical. It's just not what's actually happening.
Yeah, and it's all what I would caution people against, as you said, I can understand not people who are racist, but just people who are just trying to sort it out in their heads, right?
Yeah.
And ironically, it's also recent immigrants who feel this way, right? Like, you would think that recent immigrants might be more welcoming to new immigrants, but sometimes they could be the most restrictive and the most gung-ho to close the borders now that they've come in, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm saying, like, forget it. I'm not talking about racism, even though there is a streak of that, I think. Because if you've noticed, nobody's trying to restrict immigration from Sweden to this country, right? So, but having said that, it does become very easy to say, well, are there enough resources here? And part of it also is tied into the way libertarians view the government, that if you had less nanny state government, then truly the people who want to come here for a better life would be coming here to try to work their way through it, as opposed to wanting to come here, quote unquote, illegally, and try to just take advantage of the system, meaning the government services, right? But the other thing I would caution is don't fall for what the government is currently portraying, which is the relatively rare cases of criminal illegal immigrants, right? Like, because those are all in the news, right? Like, here's another guy here illegally who murdered, raped, or whatever, or robbed a bank or whatever. And that's powerful stuff, man. Like, who's going to justify that? I can't justify that. Like that person should be deported, right? I have trouble justifying saying don't deport him, right? Because they're criminals. They've aggressed. They've murdered. So I But the problem is that you tend to think that everybody falls into that group because that's what you see on TV. That's what the administration is plastering everywhere through their little network of yentas that they have on social media, just spreading the same bullet points and the same talking points, right? Because and I think you mentioned your experiment, right? It's what happens is when you can personalize the experience. The guy at the restaurant, the guy at the bakery, the guy who takes care of my lawn or whatever, the lady who cuts my hair. Hey, they may not be legal immigrants, but they've been here for 10, 20 years. They're good people. They work hard. They're part of my church, my prayer services or whatever, my religious faith. And, when you start looking at it that way, that's the way, Hodey, I would argue that we still have to view folks, right? Like, if you're going to make it experiential on the whole. Don't make it experiential to what the government is telling you to think about it. Because I think we all remember that ridiculous, like they're eating dogs and cats in Ohio. Not coincidentally in a battleground state, right? So we have to keep our eye on the ball there, in my opinion. And yeah. So, Hodey, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you hate doing this. So I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. Prediction: by the time we do our next episode, will the shutdown be resolved, or will it still be a little thorny talking point for us next week?
I haven't seen anything that makes me think the two sides are coming to a conclusion. Trump has not yet cut stuff and had the executive order, executive or the judicial tell him he's not allowed to do it. And I expect we're going to have to get there first. So I'm thinking he's not done yet. And so I'm going to go ahead and say we'll still be in shutdown if I had to guess. But I will say I think it's these things tend to develop pretty quick. I want to see maybe a little more reputational damage. At the moment, I think what I'm waiting for, because like this week I told you about the California airline where it's like, oh, like this is what tower went unmanned. Somebody could have crashed into something.
Like you said, literally for 6 hours.
6 hours. Maybe a crash needs to happen first, right? Like maybe something really bad has to happen, and then we're all talking about it, and then they will quickly resolve it. Do you remember? I'm going to make a sports analogy here. Sure. Do you remember when the replacement refs got the Fail Mary wrong?
Oh, sure. Green Bay versus Seattle.
Absolutely, right? They resolved things with the referees, the
24 hours.
Referees, 24 hours. They were like, whoops, right? Like something really bad had to happen first, and then they brought in the new guys.
Yeah, so something that affected their livelihood. To your point, they were going to lose revenue because everybody was saying, this is horrible. Those refs are like killing the game. That's a great example. I'm glad you thought of that.
Yeah, and like things were bad before, right? Like bad calls were still happening, but it took like a disaster. So like right now, like I said, 1% of Americans are losing their checks, but like people are going to ignore them because we're so divided and atomized right now. 53% of flights are delayed, but that's something that it's like, well, that's for the rich class, right? Like these people are flyers. Right. Maybe that's not me. I'm thinking we're going to have to see something that makes everybody kind of go, ooh, that's real bad first. Right. I hope I'm wrong because I don't like it when bad things happen to good people, but we will see.
Okay. And
how about you? What's your guess?
Okay. Before I give you my guess, I'm not going to weasel my way out of it, but we have our friend here. Let's see, where is she? It's Terry from Are You Smarter Than a Politician? She says, hi, John and Hodey. Hi, Terry. Always happy to see you. And then she asks, why do you think Trump can't do the cuts? That's a good question. And there's really a simple answer, Terry, in my opinion, is because Trump has never cut anything in his life. He is the king of debt. This goes back to before he entered government, when he was just a New York playboy. He has a disdain for any sort of financial discipline. It's just not in his DNA. And also, while he's been in government, every budget he's enacted has increased the deficit. He loves spending somebody else's money. He'll tell you that if you read his books. He hates spending his own money. So I don't think he has the stomach for it. But then she also clarifies just now, as she heard my explanation, I thought you meant he couldn't do it legally. Well, Hodey did make a distinction, right? There are certain things that he can't cut, even if he issues an executive order, that can only be cut through acts of Congress because they were authorized by acts of Congress. The things that he has the most control over really don't amount to much. Things like government contractors, like he can issue executive orders either and it's not clear, but he could issue executive orders that either fires those people, furloughs them, or as he intimated today, the people who are furloughed are not going to get their back pay. I think he started making noise about that as a threat. I don't know if he's actually going to go through with it, Terry. So there. And so hopefully that helped answer your question. And now, Mr. Hodey, just so I don't leave you hanging or you think I'm a weasel, I think we'll still be talking about this next week, the government shutdown, that is. And but here's a piece of advice for Democrats out there, if they're willing to take it. The best thing you can do is say nothing at this point. Just continue to hold out against them. Not that I think you guys are any great bargain, nor do I think you have the high ground morally, because I think if you were in charge of the budget, and to some extent you were, your budgets are horrible too, right? But I think from a messaging and from a looking ahead to the midterms, your best bet is to do nothing, keep your yap shut, and let Trump do what he does best, which is flap his pie hole and wait for an unforced error. Because eventually, if you just refused to give them the votes in the Senate, so they can't get to 60. The truth of the matter is, on a very simple level for Joe Everyperson, Trump is in the White House, the Senate is run by Republicans, the House is run by Republicans. The math to most people doesn't add up that when your party controls government, you can't get things done. We accused the Democrats of it when Obama had it. We accused Trump of it the first go round, the first 2 years of Trump 45, right? So the truth of the matter is, I think, Hodey, the best, we'll still be in this next week, but the best move of the Democrats is keep their yap shut, let the Republicans ramble, don't go along with them, and then wait for Trump to make a mistake. Because eventually he'll have to, whatever he can cut through executive order, he will cut, and it will affect, eventually bite his group in the behind, whether it's the farmers, whether it's the quote privileged class because they can't get to their meetings in different states on time because of the ATC or whatever. I think that might push him to resolve. And if there's one thing we know about Trump, he's a populist. He'll do whatever the majority of the people seem to be telling him to do, for better or for worse. That's the way he operates. And if there's enough MAGA people crowing at him, whether it's to release the Epstein files or cut a deal for the budget or whatever, he'll do that if there's enough public pressure. So if I'm the Democrats, I keep my mouth shut. I let Trump. I give enough rope for Trump to hang himself, in my opinion.
Yeah, not a bad recommendation. I will say, Terry, if you're still there, I hope you are. The act, I didn't have it at the time, and that reminded me, so I can look it up now. It's the Government Employment Fair Treatment Act that requires you, if these employees still work while they are furloughed, or you command them to work with back pay, you are legally obligated to pay it. Trump was confronted with the fact that he legally has to pay these people, and his response was, and I quote, "They don't deserve it." That's right. Fine for Trump, but it's not a matter of deserve. It's a matter of legally, right? What you're able to, like, what you can actually do, Mr. Trump. You are legally obligated to pay these people unless, like, you have some kind of some kind of court new resolution, right? Yeah. Like, and he doesn't have it. He can issue an executive order that will be ruled unconstitutional later, which will make things ugly. It will make things bad, but it will get overturned eventually. Yeah, that's basically that.
Yeah, and as we've learned, the Trump administration doesn't go by what the law says they can do. They seem to operate with, what does the law prevent me from doing? Which is not the same thing. By taking the position, we'll do stuff if there's nothing that prevents us to do it. As we've seen, what that means is I'll do something that maybe the rest of humanity and history in the U.S. has said, you shouldn't do that. We don't do that here. He'll do it until there's something that says you can't do it. And then at that point, even it'll be 50-50 whether he complies, right? So it's going to be interesting to me how this resolves itself. But politically, I'll wait. I'll bet on it still being an issue next week. Oh boy, Terry's on fire in the chat there. She really does not like those government employees. Okay, before we sign off, let's get Terry's comment up here. Sure. She says, no, he can fire 1.2 million people in many departments. I'll send you the information. And then she follows that up with, I hope he fires them all. Okay, Terry. Fair enough, Terry. I don't think I would agree with you on that. Look, maybe there is a statute that allows them to do that with certain agencies. Fair enough. I don't know enough, so I will defer to you on that issue. But I don't know that it's a good idea to fire 1.2 million people immediately. Yeah, reduce the government. And Terry actually is. As much as we love her and as well-meaning as I know she is, this is what Hodey and I were talking about earlier, that sometimes libertarians or small government proponents, they'll take things in isolation, and then that feeds into the perception of the callousness of libertarians. And a lot of the questions you get from people who are questioning of libertarian and libertarianism, libertarian principles is, what do you do about the poor people? Are you for people dying and starving in the streets? You know, who will take care of the sick and things of that nature? Where, let's face it, libertarians have a PR problem, Hodey. And that's part of the reason that we have, while most of our ideas have a lot of traction with most people, I think that's one of the things that we almost steadfastly do a poor job of communicating how libertarians would make those issues better.
Yeah, I mean, if Trump cuts the IRS, fantastic, right? Like,
Right.
I'm a happy man. I want Terry to be right. I like I said, I'm not perfect in my reading of the laws and legislations and everything.
And you're not a lawyer, let's face it.
Yeah, and I'm not a lawyer. They're like, to me, whenever there's a new piece of information, I don't say, "Oh, I know like the laws in effect." I have to go look them up like everybody else, right? Like, you know, the reason I know what I know currently about the shutdown is because when I heard there was going to be a shutdown, I was like, "Oh, Trump's threatening to shut stuff down. What can he legally shut down?" And so, you know, I went to the AP and I went to the, you know, .gov archives, and I was like, let's figure out what he can do here. Let's see some history. And so, Terry, you could have seen information that is correct, and my searching just didn't take me there. I of course will look at whatever you have to show. Believe me, I am very eager to blame Trump for more. So if he actually could be cutting stuff and is not doing it, hey, that sounds like a party for me. I don't need more incentive.
Right, Jana party.
Yeah.
All right. All right. As always, Terry, check her out along with our friend Free over at the Are You Smarter Than a Politician game show. One of the great times on the internet, Hodey. I think both you and I will attest to that. Not just as participants, but really, you know, they've hit on a great formula there, and wish them all the success in the world. I think they're doing a great job. We'll always support them on there. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Free for All on this Thursday night. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll join us again next week at this same time, same bat channel, 10 p.m. Thursday nights on the East Coast, 7 on the West Coast. Catch the video on demand version of this at the Distant Warrior YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Distant Warrior, all one word. You can find us on X. You can find us on Facebook. Check us out. The new website's going to be up soon. It's not up yet, I promise. We're working on it really hard. It'll be up soon. But when it does come up, it'll be distantwarrior.com. All right. Until next week, from my friend and co-host over there, Mr. Hodey Johns. See you next week, everybody. Peace.